the night's other lead story, the Supreme Court voting 5-4 to uphold the president's travel ban, backing up his contention that he has the right to control immigration into the U.S., even as he faces ongoing blowback over the treatment of migrants crossing this border. Well, tonight, the ruling brought protesters onto the streets of New York and other cities across this country, a bit reminiscent of those early and spontaneous airport demonstrations when the travel ban was first put into place. Earlier today, the president was taking a bit of a verbal victory lap, praising the ruling, taking it as a sign of an endorsement of his hardline views on immigration.
The Supreme Court ruling was a tremendous victory for this country and for the Constitution. The Supreme Court ruling was a tremendous victory for our country. The ruling shows that all of the attacks from the media and the Democrat politicians are wrong, and they turned out to be very wrong. Other countries, it's called, I'm sorry, you can't come in, you have to leave. This one, we have judges, and we have to change it. It's so simple. It's called, I'm sorry, you can't come in.
Now, what the justices upheld today is the third version of his travel ban, which largely impacts Muslim-majority countries. 5 of the 7 countries affected here are, in fact, Muslim-majority. The vote was 5-4, the court's conservatives making up the majority, their reasoning affirming the president's broad power to act in the name of national security. They made this up to the executive, up to and including the power to keep certain people out of the country. The court also noted that power was not undermined by the president's previous and numerous statements about Muslims. Justice Sonia Sotomayor of New York took issue with that in her dissent, writing, quote, "It leaves undisturbed a policy first advertised openly and unequivocally as a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States, because the policy now masquerades behind a facade of national security concerns." And granted, the president's views on Muslims have been crystal clear since the earliest days of his candidacy.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until our country's representatives can figure out what the hell is going on. We have to maybe check respectfully the mosques, and we have to check other places, because this is a problem that if we don't solve it, it's going to eat our country alive. I think Islam hates us. There's something there that there's a tremendous hatred there. There's a tremendous hatred. We have to get to the bottom of it.
Another way of looking at this is that the travel ban ruling is as much Mitch McConnell's victory as it is Trump's. When a vacancy came up on the court, remember, with 11 months left in the Obama presidency, it was McConnell who kept that seat empty. He would not give a hearing to the Obama nominee for the court, Merrick Garland. That gave Trump an open net, and he appointed Neil Gorsuch to the court early in his presidency. Today, not long after the court's opinion was announced, there was this. McConnell's campaign posted this photo of himself and Gorsuch on Twitter. It's not clear yet what the high court's decision might mean for this administration's so-called zero-tolerance immigration policy. The president was asked about that today.
Does it embolden you about the idea of deporting people without due process as well? Do you think would you
we
like
have to find a system where you don't need thousands of judges sitting at a border?
Today, the head of Health and Human Services said 2,047 migrant children are still in department's care, yet to be reunited with their parents. First Lady Melania Trump is making a second visit to the border later this week. Meantime, 18 Democratic state attorneys general are now suing the Trump administration in an effort to force officials to reunite the children with their families. Attorney General Jeff Sessions, who first started carrying out this zero-tolerance policy a few months ago, today inelegantly made a broader point about class.
The rhetoric we hear from the other side on this issue, as on many others, has become radicalized. We hear views on television today that are on the lunatic fringe, frankly. And what is perhaps more galling is the hypocrisy. These same people live in gated communities, many of them, and are featured at events where you have to have an ID to even come in and hear them speak. And if you try to scale the fence, believe me, they'll be even too happy to have you arrested and separated from your children. If they would like to see that.
And attempted humor there by the Attorney General, rewarded by applause and laughter in the room. Let's bring in our panel tonight. Robert Costa, national political reporter for the Washington Post, moderator of Washington Week on PBS. Jill Colvin, White House reporter for the Associated Press. And Jeremy Bash, former chief of staff at CIA and the Pentagon, also an MSNBC national security analyst. And that's the area I'd like to begin with tonight, Jeremy. You're also the only lawyer here. What are the national security implications at play in light of this Supreme Court decision as you see it?
Well, this 5-4 decision, Brian, really wasn't a surprise because if you'll recall, the president started his administration almost from day one, initiating a total categorical blanket ban on 7 Muslim-majority countries. And that's what led the courts to rein him in. And only after the president tried a third time did he whittle down the policy and included countries like North Korea and Venezuela. And finally, he's able to pass by the thinnest of majorities, 5-4, some constitutional muster. But it does not mean that the policy is wise. And from a national security perspective, you want to do risk-based targeting. You want to use intelligence to focus your security apparatus on the true risks, not engage in blanket targeting or categorical bans or bans of national origin. So from a perspective of national security, this policy remains very, very unwise and unsafe.
Jill Colvin, take us to the West Wing. How did this play out today?
The president was still in the residence when he found out about this today, but the message from the very beginning, the word they were using was vindication. The president wound up using that later on in a statement that he gave. This was, for the president, in his eyes, a huge win, proving that the Democrats, that the media who criticized this policy, calling it a Muslim ban, saying it was unnecessary, saying that it was racist, saying that it was xenophobic, saying that all of those people were wrong and that, in fact, the courts agreed with him. To be clear, the version that they agreed with was very far from the original ban that he put into effect when he first took office, and that sort of shock and awe series of executive orders. This was something that various agencies across the government spent weeks and weeks and weeks building criteria, trying to come up with objective sets of things that they wanted countries to do so that they could make sure that this would actually pass muster and that the courts would actually approve it. But the president right now is in a position where he is emboldened. He feels that despite all of the outcry against the separation policy, he feels now that his hardline immigration policies are a winning issue and something that he wants to keep pressing and intends to keep pressing going into the midterm elections.
Robert Costa, as I always say, this is another subject. You were present at the creation. You were there for the now famous remarks. Donald J. Trump wants to ban all Muslims from entering this country. Even though this was 3.0, even though he complained this was the watered-down version of what he wanted, how can he not see this as a straight-up vindication? We know already Steve Bannon sure does.
It may be a vindication. It's also a reminder of who are the ideological anchors in this administration. You remember back in 2017, Attorney General Jeff Sessions, for all of his quarrels with the president, he is still there directing policy on the border. Stephen Miller's still there. Steve Bannon's gone. John Kelly was then the Homeland Security Secretary when the travel ban first came out. He was on a helicopter when he first heard the news. It's the people like Sessions and Miller inside of this administration who are driving policy. And it's a reminder, too, Brian, the courts are going to be on the ballot this fall for the midterm elections. This reveals how much power they have over the future of the country. And both parties will battle over who's going to get the next pick.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.